Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Trends. This is Emily Marquis of Marquis Jewelry Academy, and with me tonight I have Chloe Swanson, and I am going to let her introduce herself.
Hi there. I am a long-term fan and friend of Emily's. We worked together for quite a number of our formative years in the jewelry industry, experienced a lot of repair, creation, and jewelry mayhem and madness, as well as some really, really awesome pieces. I have a great vast background in restoration as well as jewelry history and trends. I've worked in the art and design sector in a lot of different mediums over the years, so I've kind of always tried to find a collaborative way to adorn myself with art. And that being said, we're going to talk about what's up and coming and how you can stay relevant.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's dive right into that. I just want to thank everybody who's kind of joined us this afternoon. A lot of what we're doing with these various Zoom chats is we're kind of taking an opportunity to try new forms of dialogue and new ways for us to all get connected, and for me to introduce the people that I've kind of worked with and the knowledge that I've gained over the last decade and a half directly to you guys, where you have access to ask questions as the conversation's going, because I'm sure countless times you've watched something and been like, wait, I've got 30 questions. Don't go any further. This is the topic I want to focus on. And so that for me is a lot of fun to see how you guys react. And that's kind of the perk of ingesting the content live with us, is you get to be involved and we get to interact with you and then host it on YouTube later for everybody else to watch where they wished they could ask the questions. So really our conversation today is just kind of focusing on trends of jewelry kind of over the last couple of 100 years, and probably with a focus on the more recent stuff and kind of how history informs right now. So I'm going to go ahead and just get started with like a really blanket question. Chloe, could you tell me kind of what you think are the top one or two things that you're seeing up and coming right now?
So I went ahead and cashed in on them just for the sake of the conversation. But we have seen the rise and fall of the hoop earring, have we not? So, it's something that there was stigmas attached to it. There were ethnic groups attached to it. It's become a trademark look or a signature look for some. But what I really recall is in the early 2000s, late 90s, the big, gorgeous gold hoop or silver hoop, or white gold hoops, even in Mean Girls, were a statement piece. And I remember Jennifer Lopez had her fabulous hoop, and it just kind of did something for a lot of women in this kind of empowering, beautiful trend. Then I watched it kind of fall, where it was kind of a has-been thing for many years, and it's risen back in the last 5 or so, in my opinion. And I think a lot of this has to do with kind of things that go around and come around. We have pieces that we invested in that we found to be classic or statement pieces, and we try to bring them back. So I will say that the hoop is, one of the most obvious, but it is very important. We had such a huge amount of chunky gold hoop pieces, or door knocker style earrings in the 80s as well. So I think we're all trying to like scurry through our grandmother or mother's closets and, scrounge up those pieces if we can. So that's probably the first trend that is still, I saw very heavily last year, but it's still firm this year. Yes, snake and serpent pieces are everywhere, and Emily and I worked very closely on a few of those. We had a really, really awesome gold serpent ring. I don't know if Emily recalls it. I believe it was a green garnet that was inside, which was really awesome. And it inspired my desperate vision of these fabulous serpent earrings that I've always wanted. Around the same time period, Emily launched her serpent earring, which is stunning, as well as her really fabulous serpent pendant that can be almost an enhancer for really anything. So definitely snakes. I totally agree with that. And I think that also goes towards the old is new kind of thing, like a lot of the Egyptian Renaissance, which Emily touches on a ton, with your scarabs, as well as kind of like your beautiful lapis that you mix in with that too. But I will say that metal tones, I'm seeing a lot still to this day. Over the last year and a half, we're getting tons and tons of saint jewelry, as well as like little heirloom charm pieces that are kind of being passed through as either your, you know, Saint Mary or Saint Anthony, or all these different little pieces, and they're kind of influencing, in my opinion, from Latin cultures, which is awesome. And that being said, there's so much more yellow gold, and I think gold tones, in my opinion, kind of have their rise and fall, where we had a ton of rose gold probably in like the early 2010s, and then it shifted now to yellow. So, you know, it can be a status symbol. It can be something that people feel like they're investing in, but I mean, I'm about it. I love it.
Yeah, so I felt like a lot recently. I've definitely noticed, you know, I don't think Egyptian Renaissance culture, you know, interest, fascination, I don't think that's gone away since they opened the tombs, right? You see it pop up every decade and a half since the late 1700s. And it kind of keeps coming back. And every time it comes back, it's getting influenced by whatever greater design wave is happening. So there was really popular in the Victorian jewelry era, where you had like the mid to late 1800s, and everything was blended with garnets and onyx and yellow gold and big chunky pieces of sardonyx. And you have it come back again into the like 1920s and Deco era, where things start to either be incredibly angular and geometric, and then just a couple years before, they were incredibly fluid and all over the place, you know, in that beautiful sweeping designs. And it really stuck through, I think, through most of the 60s, 70s, and then kind of has remade a resurgence now, where people are back into snakes, back into scarabs, back into cartouche, kind of anything Egyptian. And I think that we just still haven't gotten over that fascination from discovering it.
Emily, let me ask you this. So you're doing some really cool pieces. Your cartouche collection is coming together really well. And I think you've done a really good job of kind of educating, you know, a lot of your audience too about, you know, where you get a lot of your influence, which is really awesome to me, because I love to kind of know how these ideas are formed or where they come from. Do you think that there's a tie between like the nameplate necklace and the cartouche? Do you find that, you know, in ways that we've kind of Americanized or modernized or Europeanized, you know, this culture in a way to establish these designs?
Yeah, I definitely think that, you know, well, I mean, even wearing the cartouche pendant is still like it's a tourist product that everybody's grandma got, you know. And I think that that's mostly when we're thinking about those pieces, that's what we're thinking about. We're thinking about the World War II era grandparent who had a silver or gold cartouche pendant, and then we found it, and oh my gosh, I love it so much. And man, I can't, or, you know, I don't have one of those, and everybody has this heirloom piece, and, you know, it really bums me out. When we talk about the symbolism there, nobody really knows what the the symbolism is when you look at the cartouche that are more commonly made, when you look at the scarab carvings on the back of those stones, they're more done in a digestible way that the product could be reproduced, but doesn't inherently mean something. It's like getting, takeout tattooed on your arm, but you thought it meant like, ethereal beauty or whatever in Chinese script, right? There's like a million people with one of those tattoos that they said, well, it means this, and then somebody's like, no, that's not what that means. And I think that's in a way kind of okay, especially when the designers go, this doesn't mean anything, it can mean whatever you want, right? So I find a lot of times when I'm designing stuff with symbolism, I kind of weave the story where there's probably 4 or 5 things that it could mean. Inherently different symbols mean different things, and whatever it means to you, that's what I want. That's what I want you to get from it. And so I think that when you have, when would you say, Chloe, the nameplate necklace really became popular?
I know that there were some as early as the 60s. I know that the 80s and the early 90s, they were much, much bigger. I'd have to double check, just kind of do a little more glancing at where we're seeing them influence in pop culture. I know that I will say really, really cool, eclectic neighborhoods like the Bronx or Brooklyn or whatever else carry most of these trends before they become popularized. And a lot of that has to do with music, of course, right? So
right.
Any type of music video or photo shoot done by whatever celebrity or artist at the time will draw a ton of influence. And hip hop culture or Latin culture has always drawn a big support for jewelry, in my opinion, where others have liked, there's been more of a modest statement behind the styling, but I've always loved a big glam. And so I love the rock star look of like, let's put on the biggest gold hoops we got. Let's put on the fabulous nameplate. Let's actually have, a dog tag, and let's diamond the hell out of it.
Right.
And a couple designs in it. Even dog tags obviously are military, and giving them to your sweetheart or whatever else when you came back was kind of a sign of an ode or a promise to this person, like similar to the sash of the Renaissance, like, here's my sash for my night, and I hope you win your Lansing this evening, or you don't.
Here's my pin, put it on your sweater, right? That whole
right.
detail.
And same with Lover's Eyes, like we both love them. Excuse me, any of those who are not familiar with them, they're these really, really fantastically stunning miniature portraits done in either a button or a pin or a hat pin, sometimes a pendant or even a ring, but these little kind of eclectic charms of your lover's eye. And the whole ode was that they were watching. So, you were always supposed to be good and honest and moral to your loved one. But that being said, going way back over to my off topic to carry on. So I know that David Yurman did dog tags, and he did really cool dog tags that had like, they were silver, they were embossed, and then he'd have like one with a little heart in it or a star. I think he even did the Star of David. He did one with a little peace sign in it, and they were supposed to be these kind of like soft, sweet little tiny, charms, as still an ode to this fabulous kind of blinged out Renaissance we had on then. I recall there was also one where it was a dog tag, had maybe, black diamonds in or whatever else, or maybe he ombre'd them down. And then there was a little charm hanging on top of it. And you could kind of bedazzle almost your own bedazzling, which was always kind of fun. Personal, people use jewelry in so many ways to kind of commemorate things or celebrate or honor. And, it's a piece that ideally you'll have forever. We all know that some jewelry doesn't last forever, but ultimately, the concept is to be able to have these pieces that you really recall more. So I'm going to relocate because I have some DC street noise, which is a little bit loud. So don't mind me for a moment.
So while you're shifting, I was going to say, I wonder how much of rock and roll and kind of the R&B, hip hop, rap culture started becoming more of a popular trend once we had MTV. And we kind of started being able to see what they were projecting through their video content. And then that was that first opportunity to go, okay, I'm going to have this person on film, and the thing that they're wearing might be kind of small and not take up the whole screen. So let's make it flashy. Let's make it huge. Let's make sure that they can tell exactly what's happening on the 20-inch television screen when they're all crowded around the living room, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because right now we have, 47-inch televisions in every house, and everybody's got a personal phone and a personal computer. And when we're talking about being able to see what someone's wearing, you can zoom and the paparazzi can like totally get every photo of it. And it allows us to kind of go, okay, like maybe delicate is nice. Maybe you can see that detail still. But when you were putting rock stars and various icons on television, they needed you to be able to tell everything that was going on there so that it could actually make the statement that they were hoping it would have. And I think that probably has to do with things becoming bigger and bolder and chunkier, just so that they could get they could get heard or seen, I guess, in that way. And then that kind of translated to, well, if that star's wearing it this way, then I guess I need to wear it that way on the school bus, and I need to wear it that way in my office and to the grocery store. And it's like, well, you're not in a video, so maybe
Well, it becomes acceptable
to be like that.
And that's where, touching on the concept of like conservative jewelry versus, a little more high impact bling, the massive hoop versus the subtle hoop, is really kind of comes down to also, people getting comfortable with seeing it on other people. I think that's what a big part of our culture is like, we had so many trends, like we touched on this the other day, that, you had to have it type thing. Like the Tiffany's, I don't know the exact name, but the Tiffany's silver little heart necklace with the toggle or without.
Right.
It was in like $200 to $500 price range, depending on what version you got. You could get the bracelet.
Right.
Everyone's familiar with that piece, and I recall that was a piece that like was one of my first younger self purchases that was like really major. And I still have it. Actually, I could totally pull it on my closet, but it feels so tarnished. But that being said, I can't get rid of it. As much as I look at it and think, oh God, I'll never wear it again. There's always kind of this concept behind me that I'm really proud of being able to get that piece. So I will touch back on the rock star concept and the influence. Stephen Webster is probably the perfect example of that. He is one of my favorite designers. He is such a rock star himself. He is British and so amazing. And he has a big, big influence by the rock community. He has collections that are inspired by the Seven Deadly Sins, 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and, Bats and Super Stud, just all these really super cool concepts and ideas about doing things bigger, brighter, with more of a bang, to really stand out and be bold. And the cool thing about him was he partnered with some really cool models and really fun celebrities. Him and Christina Aguilera were very close. So kind of in her resurgence, when she kind of popped back up and started being on The Voice and whatnot, she was wearing a lot of his pieces because she's always been a very bold, forthcoming, kind of rock star, unapologetically loud, vocally and visually. I think it's great, if it works for her image and what she's got going on. I know that, he had some really cool, I think it was Lenny Kravitz, if I remember correctly. Lenny Kravitz did some really cool pieces with him. And what it does is it emulates this kind of, if you're attracted to the design or you're attracted to that artist, I think what it does is it really truly markets in its most perfect way, where you think, okay, I need that piece and it'll complete my look. And that's how we curate these, like, you know, the David Yurman bracelet, the cable bracelet. And
Yeah, how did that happen? Do you have any idea how that came about? Because I was not tracking jewelry at that time.
I do. I know, not the most in-depth story of it, but I recall it. My grandmother actually met David Yurman, and yes, the Elsa Peretti Open Heart, absolutely. So David Yurman was a sculptor, and I think he might have even been a welder, but he was working in metal and ironworks, I believe. You can fact check me if you have to, but I think that's what he was doing. That being said, he was walking along a train track, or some kind of like urban, not so great infrastructure with a lot of trash and debris. And he found a cable, you know, some kind of disposed cable from a construction site, or maybe it was a train car or something, but some kind of very industrial piece. And he wrapped around his wrist and started wearing it. From this moment, it kind of launched a little spark in his brain of how he could curate this look. He ended up casting it in silver, and there was the cable bracelet, born alive in America's new Tiffany bracelet. So I do respect him immensely as a designer. I know he is commercialized massively at this point in time, but and his son has a lot of influence in the business now. But I think what was so interesting about him was he used to sell his jewelry out of the back of his car, at trade shows, trunk shows, whatever else. Even where Emily and I worked together, that's how the first part of the collection was purchased, was out of the trunk of a car. So established, you know, jewelry professionals around the country were like, this guy has talent and we want his pieces, even though they're literally coming out of a shady trunk. So he made this amazing market to basically create this coveted piece. It came petite, it came chunky. They had one called Renaissance, which was kind of towards an ode to the original brand, which was heavier visually, much heavier bezels, two-tone. You had, you know, your gold, thick, chunky bezel with maybe, you know, some kind of pretty topaz in it, and just a chunky cable that went all the way around. He had more delicate pieces that were like 3 millimeters, you know, really, really skinny in gold with maybe just like a baby pave clasp. For children. They were even made for kids. It was literally like, get your baby one. Which, you know, I respect it, you know, jewelry for everyone. But I do recall my mom getting her first piece probably in 98, you know, like sometime between 97 and 2000. They started popping up on my radar, even though I was much younger. And I remember thinking, wow, it was really cool, and always kind of coveted my mom's jewelry. You know, she didn't have a vast collection, but she had really cool pieces. So whenever she would get a new piece, because my grandmother and her were both very into jewelry, but, you know, had really awesome taste in the sense that, you know, I'd be like, oh my God, I had no idea my mom had that piece that I now want 6 years later because the magazine.
Right.
But that's another influence too that I always find interesting is, you know, seeing pieces that your mother or your grandmother or an aunt or a teacher or whomever, you know, some kind of older influential person in your life, you know, generation or so ahead, and getting your own style influences from them. So that's what David Yurman did for me, you know, at a point in time. And I, you know, watched him become such a magnetic icon that to meet him or even see him in a jewelry store, you know, when he would do these guest appearances, people would have him sign little tiny jewelry bags, you know, and like frame them. It was like getting a signature from, I don't know, I mean, like Britney Spears or something crazy. It was like, oh my God, David Yurman signed my jewelry pouch. And his stuff has just been really cool. I mean, it's changed. It used to be all US manufactured. I think he's doing Italy and China now and Indonesia. And he's got this whole big, massive production. But in theory, it's like what we all aim for, you know, in concept, in a theory of commercialized success. And they operate very well. And, you know, hats off to them. But I will say, you know, that goes also with what we're all probably thinking of is like, well, who's wearing cable bracelets now? You know?
Right.
And that's not to say that people aren't, you know, and they are, they might be part of their own.
They really are. There's a lot of people still wearing them, but I just don't think that they're as
Like a hot commodity now, right?
yeah, they're not as tradable. They're not worth more than they are, right? So there's some jewelry that at the time that you buy it, like it's worth more than its MSRP.
Right.
It's an investment piece. It's going to, you know, if you'd wanted to turn around and sell it 6 months later, 3, 4, 20 times more expensive. But a lot of stuff, eventually the desire for it levels out, and then it's like, well, no, it's worth its weight in gold. That's where we're at, right? It's come back down off of this investment like plateau and has kind of come back down to a normal jewelry reality, right?
Yeah. Well, and you know, it's what, you know, we would call a rise and fall in concept, right? So where you have someone who gets really like massive stardom, launches into, you know, a commercialized state where they're in Bloomingdale's, Neiman's, RIP, Macy's, whatever else, like whatever you find success to be in your jewelry world. But in my concept, you know, I'm always personally more interested in the unique, the little guy, you know, the smaller pieces that are really handcrafted. But I also have massive respect for iconic institutions like Tiffany's and Cartier. You know, they built brands and really trailblazed jewelry in a way that curated the ability for us to even have opportunities to see or handle or buy or wear these pieces. You know, a lot of them were literally royal gems. You couldn't get like a Riviera, you know, because it was reserved for people of a certain status or whatever else. And being able to say, okay, you know, if I do have the disposable income of $65,000, I could get a small Riviera. Not that that's in my current budget, but
Mine neither.
like one day I'll sell my house and, you know, just wear a Riviera. But
It's I was researching Elizabeth Taylor, and obviously like she's a totally different level, right?
goals, just goals.
But I was just kind of like, you know, they're talking about these pieces and they're like, yeah, well, when she passed away and they sold her whole collection, it sold for $1.3 million, but her husband bought it for $30,000 at auction. And I'm like, who's got that auction money? You know,
Richard Burton.
what an investment that is, right?
Yes. And, you know, she is an icon in the jewelry world. And truly, I mean, I don't know if, you know, I assume we're all jewelry lovers here. That's why we're here. But I don't know if anyone recalls who their first jaw-dropping jewelry icon was. Like, could it have been Breakfast at Tiffany's, Audrey Hepburn, you know, with her beautiful, iconic pearl, all black look at Tiffany's, you know. Was it Tiffany? Was it Cartier? Was it David Yurman? Was it, you know, some really cool Native American piece that you saw someone wearing on their arm that was like this big? Was it flipping through a textbook and seeing, you know, jewel encrusted sarcophagus? You know, what was it that made you fall in love with bedazzling or bejeweling or, you know, encrusting yourself in concept? She was that for me, absolutely, though. And her, you know, 5 engagement rings or something like that are just one of them.
I feel like only Henry VIII was married more than Elizabeth Taylor.
Yeah, that's possible. But I think that, you know, she curated the true Hollywood glam. You know, she was not of the earlier era of Hollywood glam. In my opinion, like she was probably more of like, you know, what we affiliate the bigger, more modern names, which would be like Marilyn Monroe and of course Audrey Hepburn or Katharine Hepburn, or you know, that kind of era that's more commercialized versus our silent screen sirens who were just as bedazzled. But
Right.
Elizabeth Taylor, you know, seeing her in Cleopatra, the jewelry, the gold, oh my god, it's like I wanted to be Cleopatra for Halloween for the rest of my life, maybe every day, like not even just and those are those trends, those like emulations that you start to kind of bring in. You're like, oh, okay, well, I could do my eyeliner like this, or I could have a headpiece that's all made of gold. You know, which one's a little more accessible at the time?
I'm still waiting for my headpiece made of gold. Thank you.
Yes, I'm still waiting for mine too. Like, maybe we could just share it. I could get custody on the weekends.
I am totally happy with a 50-50 split. We're just going to have to navigate what happens when FedEx has it.
Yeah, we might have to drive it to each other and, you know, spray it down with some Lysol in a field between the two of us. But so, Emily, who is
Yes.
a big influence for you in the scheme of things? You know, growing up, was there something that you saw? I know you have some family background for your jewelry trends or maybe jewelry style and why you make your jewelry in a certain aesthetic.
Right. So for me, I've talked about this before. I wasn't inherently into jewelry when I decided I'm going to be an artist. I just, one day I wanted to be an engineer, and then one day I wanted to be a painter, and things took a massive switch. But I think that jewelry is that fine line between engineering and painting, right? There's so much um, there's so much figuring to making a piece really work and make it strong enough and functional and able to translate, you know, all of that into elegance that I think is really, really an attractive job to be doing, right? You're using physics and you're using math and you're using structure and you're understanding the scientific backgrounds between the stones and the alloys and the chemistry. And so for me, I actually came to love jewelry from a, I guess, much more booky background. I thought that it was a good career. My uncle had encouraged me to do it because he was a goldsmith, and I should be a goldsmith because it's a solid career path. And so it wasn't until I kind of had decided I was going to be a goldsmith that I actually started studying jewelry and understanding jewelry and being impressed by pieces. I don't think I was a covetous teenager or child when it came to beautiful things. Like Rose just mentioned, I fell in love with medieval huge bling and crowns. I love crowns. I only own one though. And one of the things that came to mind when I was thinking about, well, what stuff when I was younger that I really loved, and I think like The Princess Bride comes to mind, where she's got that huge crown on her head and just kind of that like simple like beautiful wedding scene outfit that she has. And so for me, I think that's kind of, I too was really in love with Renaissance jewelry and Victorian jewelry, 500 years apart. We're not going to focus on that. More, I loved old things. And for me, that still kind of stays true, is I'm constantly trying to understand the engineering of how old jewelry was made when I'm having a tough time in 2020 making that thing with all my technology and all my research and all of my, you know, tools at hand. That fascinates me, and that absolutely blows my mind. as a jeweler, how did they do it so fine, so detailed? Nobody had the internet. So that was kind of my dip into how did we get here. And so for years I've just really enjoyed studying old chasing and repoussé designers, old jewelry makers, old chains, all that kind of stuff. And that's really where I get like tuned in and turned on, right? And so one of the big things I think is a trend, to bring it back around, is chains. I think that everybody right now is wearing chains that aren't the 1 millimeter box chain. For so long, the 1 millimeter box chain was just like acceptable. That was totally fine. Put whatever you wanted on it. It was about the pendant. It was about the accents, but it wasn't about the chain. It was just the chain was holding the thing on your neck. Now,
I was just wanting to kind of relate on that because you and I paired a lot of chains together.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about the quality of chain. You have bright cut chains, you have gold chains, you have handcrafted chains. I mean, and the list goes on. But like ultimately, there were so many times where like we would have to have conversations with customers and say, hey, this is a very mass-produced piece. It's not to say it's not nice, and it's not worth whatever you paid for it, and the sentiment could be greater than that combined 400 times. But there is something to say about handcrafted chains. And so I've always been really excited when you started making chains, because I was like, there's something really beautiful about the handcrafted artisan, concept of your paperclip chains or, your really heavy, gorgeous Rolo chains. And just watching you physically make them too, it looks like an enjoyable process. And like, I think there's something different about wearing a piece that holds that, love almost.
Right. That energy.
Yeah.
I've said it before. I think that making chains is one of the most zen things I've ever done at a bench. It's very technical. It's very focused. As somebody who has insane ADHD, making a chain is that it's the hyper focus. It's the repetition. It's a very long process, and I think it is very relaxing because of that. I think that chains are kind of a lost art because for so many years, delicate light was in. Chains that were just produced in Italy were very in. And for those of you guys who don't really track, a lot of jewelry manufactured in Italy is very similar to just about anything made in China. For a long time, they're a huge manufacturing company in that sense for craft stuff. Not to say that there aren't incredible Italian designers and makers. We know that they've had some of the best minds when it comes to engineering and art for 1,000 years. But for a long period of time, they were also huge manufacturers. So anytime you see this gold chain stamped made in Italy, it's like, that's same, made in China, right?
Well, things can be made anywhere, in concept.
Right.
That way. I was laughing about, men's jewelry and men's gifts, because it's always the leather good or, some kind of achete case or toiletry pack or something made in Italy. And I'm always like, well, how many of these have I ever bought in my life for a man? Hundreds of them.
Right.
Laugh about it. And I was like, I really like to get some cool men's jewelry pieces, and men's jewelry doesn't change a ton in trend, in my opinion.
Right.
Some get more jewelry as the trend. Like, it's more acceptable for men to wear jewelry. But yes, I agree with you on that Italy comparison.
So what I was going to say is, for a very long time, just making, just get the chain, put the pendant on it. And now we're kind of getting back to this place where the trend really is the enhancer or clasp bail situation that is combining combining the way that you put the pendant onto the chain, or you convert the chain from a necklace into a bracelet. That is in vogue right now. Being able to customize your entire design and apply things to different body parts and kind of go with the flow of however you're feeling. That's in vogue. So having a customized chain that is a perfect length, that is just the right metal combinations, because mixing metals is so in, that's where people are focusing on spending more money, getting the Rollo or the Belcher chains, getting the various kinds of odd links and thicknesses. And now you're starting to see like big, thick silver chains come in, mostly because everybody would like a big, thick yellow gold, but it's way too freaking expensive.
Yes.
I just saw Michelle pop in just a little thumbs up, because she's working on a line right now of chains with a clasp that acts as a way to, she's pulling it up right now, so I'm putting her on the screen here for me, but her clasp is also the way that the pendant will join on. So that's meant to be forward facing as opposed to sitting in the back. So for so many years, your tiny little chain had to have the clasp in the back. And now we're seeing the clasp become the focus, which is really exciting.
Well, that's like kind of an ode in your total original awesome way, but like an ode to earlier we were talking about the toggle, you know.
Mhm.
Toggle was like, all right, first and foremost, I want to put my necklace on in the front. I don't want to do this, you know, like I don't want to keep link things together and put them together. So I love, you know, really showcasing your clasp and being able to kind of do something really unique and pretty and enhance it, because it is jewelry. All of it should be jewelry.
Right. I think that's something that's happening, is people are getting fed up with paying for things that aren't a finished product, that aren't usable, that aren't applicable. It's like, I want this all to be designer. I want it all to be craftsmanship. I want every little detail of this to excite me. And I think that's really big. I was talking to one of my students today, and she goes, well, I don't wear a lot of jewelry. I'm a nurse. What's in fashion right now? Is it statement jewelry, or is it delicate? And I just said to her, you know, I think what it really is it's quality. I don't think it matters right now if the piece you have is huge or delicate, or if it's just a little cute earrings or a huge bracelet collection. I think right now people are driving themselves towards a man-made, small batch, high quality materials. They're getting away from anything plated. They're getting away from anything filled. They want real silver, real gold, and that's kind of where they're going, I think.
Glass chains. You know, I will say one of my favorite pieces ever by anyone in the whole wide world of all the jewelry I've ever seen is Emily's jade chain that she had. I mean, the one that I tried on was incorporated with a sterling chain. Am I correct in that?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Like really chunky, rectangular, beautiful piece. And it felt good, and it was pretty, and it had a really nice weight. Personally, and Emily knows this about me, I like big jewelry. I like heavy jewelry. I love all jewelry, but like I'm not afraid to wear the thing that's just absurdly massive and just ridiculous. I have a necklace that's all these massive pieces of coral that are about this big, and it's heavy. Like it's like wearing a sweater. But you know, it's really cool because these stones will take on, you know, body temperature and whatever else. So sometimes they feel cool, sometimes they feel warm. I wonder what a glass chain would feel like, because I have not ever physically put on glass.
Yeah, I've got a girlfriend that actually, well, let's take a step back. Rose said glass chains are actually something I've seen on the rise, and I have one. It's my absolute favorite. You showed me that chain, and it's really quite fantastic. Very delicate, but like very plentiful, right? Lots of links that make it feel sturdy. And I recently had a student who is a glass maker, and she makes glass chains, and that's how we met. Is she admired my chains, and I was admiring her chains, and we found that in the middle was the fact that she wanted to add silver work to her chains, and I wanted to take her chains and add them to my gold and silver work. So I think that there is a really exciting path with the strength of Pyrex or Boro chain and how they can be worn really quite gorgeous. Rose says it's sort of bold because it's black, but it's also really light, and you'll forget you're wearing it.
What's you know, I have that big black leather chain necklace.
Mm-hmm.
And you got a really cool one, kind of a la inspo, sort of the same design. And what was yours made out of?
So that piece was a piece of vulcanite, which is kind of a hard rubber that was, I guess what you would call it, like a cheap alternative to jet during the mourning period, like the Victorian mourning period, where everything had to be, if you were mourning, your jewelry had to be black and it had to be matte, so it couldn't shine. So they found that there was a handful of materials that they could use to make jewelry that would look nice without being polished. And vulcanite is one of those, not quite plastic, because it was a rubber, but it was more of an approachable priced item for that era. But
petrified wood, right?
Jet is, it's a wood product.
Okay, just to clarify, because they're very similar in aesthetic, but yours was a bit lighter, if I recall.
Yeah, very light. I actually have it. Just give me half a second and I'll grab it.
I love this piece, and I used to wear another chain link necklace, which totally looked like one of those Christmas tree chains made out of paper, but leather pieces. So this was an awesome kind of similar marriage to that concept.
Hello, I lied. I wore it to my bachelorette this weekend, and it's over there somewhere. So I'm not gonna search for it, but I will include a link to a photo of it. So vulcanite is just this lighter material, and what was great about it was that they could mold it, and it didn't require soldering or connecting. It could just be flexed while hot, closed while cool, or before it cooled, and then you could create these links. And I really love how light and flexible it is, but it looks so heavy and dense. But one of the things is like, I was at dinner this weekend, and I put it up on my face like a mustache, you go like this, and it still smells like burnt rubber. I mean, if anybody's ever used a vulcanizer to make rubber molds, you'll kind of recognize that scent. It was the same process that they used to make these parts and pieces. And it just fascinates me that 150, 160 years later, a piece of burnt rubber still smells like a piece of burnt rubber. But for fashion, right?
Well, to touch on that same era, all the Memento Mori pieces, which I still love and covet. One of my favorite stories, which Emily wasn't there when it happened, but she's heard the story a dozen and a half times. Someone had inherited a beautiful piece that was, a locket with some braided hair inside, which was very, very normal in the Victorian period. That you'd have these really intricate designs with braided hair, or it would be waxed in different ways, and you'd have these designs of floral or any type of beautiful tree or blossoming plant. They had amazing, I still don't know how one gets hair you know, to cooperate that much when I can't get mine to cooperate every day.
There's a
But
book. We can read it together.
so these pieces had just a really pretty quad style plait in it, and the glass that protected it had broken in several pieces, and basically all the customer wanted was for this to be replaced. Well, of course, it's not quite that simple with Victorian pieces. Taking them apart with, you know, lead and all those other sorts of interesting things that have just kind of lived inside of a non-cleaned piece passed through generations and generations of a family. So of course, you know, some human was holding it together as well. And after it was cleaned and whatever glass was custom cut for it, the braid looked a little not so up to par. Like, oh God, we gotta fix this braid. So, you know, the most crafted of the Eastern Shore were like, how are we going to get, there was string involved, there was people's own hair involved, like trying to match this braid to figure out how this plait was done so that they could try to redo it. The problem is those pieces are done normally on like a long strip of hair, and then they cut it and trim it for this space. So rebraiding that tiny hair in that space doesn't quite work. So of course it was given back to the customer with kind of the description, the description of, hey, you know, we did our best, but because of the nature of what was being replaced, you know, some of the parts are going to be a little disrupted, including this braid. So she sends it back and she's like, you know, I want this braid fixed. Well, what else was one to do but then to rebraid new hair and, you know, try to match the braid, and then just try to maybe just incorporate both of them, because like any good jeweler, you're going to replace the broken stone, right? So replace the broken hair. That's what we're going for. And of course, you know, nothing short of the DNA test, the customer wouldn't know. And it was told to them in the kindest way, hey, we kind of had to modify this a little bit, without straight up saying, hey, we had to replace your dead grandma's hair. But some of her hair is still braided in. But those pieces, you know, they're still popular. There's a wild big museum. I can't recall. I think it's in Kentucky maybe, but it's all of Memento Mori hair.
Kansas. It's in Kansas City, Missouri, actually.
I knew it was with a K, but
I tried to go, but they were closed on Sundays.
They have some great name too, like Madame Sally's, like hair and
Mm-hmm.
like really absurd. But those pieces, you know, they're still coveted. Like I would wear a stranger's hair in a cool locket if I felt that it, you know, warranted the design well enough.
Layla's Hair Museum
Ah,
in Independence, Missouri, which is pretty much right outside of Kansas City, Missouri, is a museum that displays examples of hair art dating back to the 17th century. And so that's something interesting about the hair art, you know, if we're going to talk about the trend of making Memento Mori jewelry out of human products. They didn't just stop at, I'm going to put this cute, you know, four-sided, kind of looks like a good luck charm plate into this locket and call it a day. They were like, I'm going to make this tubular chain that goes around my neck and holds its own form, or I'm going to wrap it around my finger, or actually the brooch is going to be this big and super intricate. Oh wait, no, I need a 12 by 18 collar kind of done and then put on my wall and framed. So they didn't really just stop. It got so wildly intense that they kind of went crazy with it, and you could get just about anything made out of hair that you desired, and they would make it out of horse hair, they'd make it out of human hair, they'd make it out of pet hair, and it kind of really depended on, you know, how much did you love the person that you're commissioning this piece of, right?
well, there's also the guilt of, you know, is that all they were worth to you? You know,
Yeah.
a little bit more. We had some really cool Memento Mori pieces that we got to handle and study. There was some really awesome pieces with like I want to call it scrimshaw, but I don't know if that's going to be the correct term via date. But it was definitely, you know, some sense of bone that had been painted and flat, almost like that whalebone scrimshaw style. But there were some really beautiful pieces with like really detailed skeletons or portraiture of the person who passed with their loved ones. Beautiful hand paintings of their graves and whatever else, and it would be like the size of a dime, and it could be and you know, those are pieces that I'm seeing still, you know, relevant and able to be collected for, you know, pretty penny.
So I think a lot of that stuff is Georgian era mourning jewelry versus Victorian, so about 100 years previous difference. A lot of time on bone, on ivory, usually in a black or sepia, and they're incredibly intense imagery. It's not, oh, I just chicken scratched this whale. It was like, here is the willow tree, and here is the mourner, you know, the woman mourning her husband, and here's the urn with all of the details of his life on it, and then it's like this big, and you're like, holy crap, how did they get all those details in there?
Or here is an actual urn with those details on them that you can wear.
Right.
And that's even still kind of a trend in ways. I think, you know, some of us are a little shyer to the morbid concept of that than others. Emily had the pleasure of making a bone pendant for a loved one once. I
We
won't
don't talk about that.
Yeah, I won't rehash it. It'll bring up some PTSD. But there's all sorts of lengths people will go that aren't even in trend. You know, it's just this arbitrary concept that they've developed that will bring them, you know, a piece that they really find invaluable. And so personally, I've always kind of geared towards, I want to collect other people's obscure, you know, commissioned pieces like that. So that kind of stuff has always interested me. But I've always been really interested in Georgian and Victorian memento mori art and kind of trying to find where the extremes lie and where they stop. I don't know what the modern version of that would be outside of like, you know, very tiny little urn pendants that we've seen like for pets and things like that.
Right. Yeah.
It's frowned upon now, if you know, if people are that morbid.
Well, I think that the most common things that you see right now, as far as memento mori, are a lot of glassware being done with ashes.
Oh yeah.
That has been popular for probably the last 15 years. Glass workers are working with ash and incorporating it into beautiful drop pendants or beads. And I think that is being considered a little less morbid, a little bit more digestible because it's not noticeable, because it's kind of a sanitary ash versus human bone, human teeth, human hair, which, you know, maybe had touched your deceased person, instead of just being, you know, part of the aftermath, the cremations.
How do you feel about the concept of turning loved ones into a diamond? You know, is that a trend that we think will move towards? No, I'm trying to stay on topic in the concept of trend, though. Seriously.
No, yes, okay, so
a very strange time, right? So ultimately, you know, funerals are very costly. You can't actually really have them properly anymore. Not that it's necessary for everyone, but that grievance process is still necessary, right? So instead of cremation or being buried, you know, and turned into a tree or whatever other options we have, what do we think about the concept of, you know, carbon cutting into jewelry?
okay, well, seems like there is I'm just Googling. I'm doing my own, like, you know, whenever you're on a podcast and there's an assistant who's Googling stuff for you, that's me. I'm doing that. Diamonds from cremains. Apparently you can get it done in Buffalo, LA. And
what's the cost of something like this? Is this, you know, thousands of dollars, hundreds?
well, let's pop onto this first link here. They have an ad, so apparently it's affordable enough. Swiss Memorial Diamonds from Ashes. Laboratory creates similar environment at 300K temperature and a 60,000 bar pressure, which transforms carbon from hair or cremation ashes into diamonds. To start the process, carbon is extracted from the cremated remains and then purified. This material goes through the diamond making machines. Wow, for all of the like really intense words they're using, diamond making machine is like, okay guys, like try harder.
Could we, possibly just get our own diamond making machine for
Right, like I would like a diamond making machine. Can I just put purified carbon in there? I've got plenty, right? Um oh, and look at the little infographic that they have for how they turn
Oh, wow.
pressure and heat, and a heart shape turns your loved one into a diamond. This is genius marketing right there. It's kind of not right.
It looks like an infinity symbol as well, which is also
Yeah, that's actually brilliant. Whoever came up with that they're the winner of this. But I'm trying to figure out how much it costs. Let's see. They should just price. There's a whole listing for price. Naturally amber. So I guess the base ring stone starts at amber, or they can do red. So you kind of have to decide, do you want your diamond amber color, green, red, blue, or colorless? And that is kind of how long they process it in the machine.
okay.
And it looks like it starts at $1,400 for a quarter carat stone. And then it goes all the way up to $2,400 for a quarter carat in that clear. And then I'm sure it also scales up. My mother just texted me 0.00006% of DNA remains in the diamond. So we're getting a lot of, everybody's very dedicated to this idea, but
That's a good point, Erin. That's a great point. It is
Erin,
not that a brilliant marketing has sold an inferior, questionable, misleading, or otherwise iffy product, and it will not be the last. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that, that also comes to the point of, we do have lab created diamonds now, more available than ever before, and moissanite, and how much is the value of a true naturally sourced diamond to one versus something that could, questionably be more ethical or less costly. I'm not sure, where that moral compass lies for most, or if it does. But maybe this carbon catching or this carbon changing situation can really be the one game changer there.
so that's an interesting question, and I'm just sending a prompt to the group. What jewelry or stone myths have you heard? But while they're kind of brainstorming some of those for us, why don't we discuss diamond as a trend, as a story arc, the myths, the legends, and kind of how we trended to them and how we've trended away from them.
So De Beers is such a conglomerate, massive founder of stones across the world. And I can't quite remember the story picture perfect, but I do know that initially there was a man set out to find an area that they could possibly mine diamonds. And he did. He found this amazing place where he was like, okay, listen, here, we're going to find tons of diamonds here. I've already done the research. This is going to be great, blah, 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 blah. And De Beers was like, that's great. So basically, we're going to get you out of the picture. We're going to take over this area. We're going to mine all the diamonds. We're going to become the supreme monopoly of diamonds. We're going to set the price of diamonds. We're going to set the desire and marketability of diamonds. And we're basically going to encourage everyone in the world to know that this is how you're going to propose. You know, no longer could it be just say a word of promise or whatever else. And I'm totally painting them like a villain because they are. Because ultimately, you know, they have created the absolute market. Without De Beers, I will say that I don't think there was any possible way that they could claim diamonds to be a certain value or not, even though I personally find them to be just as valuable as they are always said to be. I am a big diamond fan in that regard. So the marketing scheme I'm a little less familiar with. I meant to do a little research more on this topic, but I remember the story as basically in the 1915, 1920s, it might have even been just as sooner, they decided that they really needed to get rid of diamonds. You know, like, hey, we really need to figure out a way to make people feel like they have to buy them, because it was, all right, we have the Depression, we have war, we have all this sadness. How are we going to get people to really expend money? And so ultimately, they created a marketing plan that said it should be 3 months' salary as an equivalent promise. And yes, total villain. Thank you for your support. But yes, diamonds are super rare in concept, according to De Beers. And what it comes down to really is that the mining process is super invasive. It's very, very horrendous, and has horrible effects on people's lives, their livelihoods, the environment, cartels even. You know, there's a whole list of slew of reasons, but De Beers decided that in the early 1900s, they were going to find a way to make diamonds be basically the way that every household would have to purchase one at a point in time. And it was the most brilliant marketing plan because we're still buying into it. And I'm not mad about it. So it's kind of one of these things that, yeah, I totally had to whisper that, but it's like they're listening. They're going to come in and steal my diamonds back or something.
We are posting this on the internet later for people's viewing pleasure. They're going to come for you. You'll never sell a diamond again.
Well, maybe they'll just force me to buy all my diamonds back at, 30% market price. I do remember that there was a point in time where De Beers was challenged by the United States because they had ultimately priced themselves out of a point, because they owned something like, they had to own, they had to have at least 10% accessible by other companies in the world because they were too much of a monopoly, and the United States was going to refuse to do business with them, which is wild, to lose the entire United States as a business platform after you marketed the hell out of your engagement program predominantly here. But anyway, that being said, we're all still falling for it, and I'm not mad. Still want one. So I don't know. How do we all feel? Do you guys think that ultimately, we should be gearing towards pieces that are not necessarily diamond? I mean, we can talk about the Mohs scale in the sense of, you do want to buy pieces that are lasting and durable, and having a piece on your hand, especially a ring, we all know how damaged and beat up they can get just unconsciously. The hardness is totally one of the main selling points, but then we could market it also as, what's to say that, I mean, I don't know much about imitation diamonds or man-made diamonds personally, just because it wasn't something I dealt with predominantly in my career. But I don't know if their hardness is the same, if they're truly the same material as diamond, or what the main difference is. So in theory, why wouldn't you pay less money for a diamond that could technically be more perfect?
Right.
Quality? Is it because it has a shorter time span that actually, it was not in the ground for millions of years and it was mined in a lab instead of mined in Africa? Like what do we feel about that?
So just to touch on some of the details before we get to all this, De Beers put out Diamonds Are Forever in 1947, and that's kind of the switch that caused diamond engagement rings to be a thing. These specs here say in 1939, roughly 10% of engagement rings had diamonds in them. By 1990, 80% of them did. And so that was kind of that transition. And even in the article that I'm reading, it's kind of describing De Beers as the De Beers cartel. So that's a very fascinating way that we look at them, kind of similar to somebody in charge of the drug trade. So for me personally, I like diamonds. I use them. I think that they are, you can easily trace modern stones, brilliant stones, how they were acquired, how they were cut, how they got brought into the world. Canada is a huge supplier of the fair trade diamond. They have diamond mines up there that they enjoy using. For me personally, when I was deciding that I wanted a diamond for my engagement ring, I asked for a mine cut diamond or a pre-1920s, 1930s diamond. For me, what that meant is the stone probably had a lifetime before me. It's probably been worn a couple times by a couple people, so technically it's used, right? And it was also before this De Beers kind of scam started happening, and all of these stones started really coming into the marketplace in a questionable manner, in an untraceable manner. Diamonds are incredibly hard. They're gorgeous. I mean, but there are also absolutely beautiful sapphires, beautiful rubies, beautiful emeralds, and arguably that all of those precious stones also have questionable backgrounds, depending on how they're sourced, when they're sourced. So I think that as much as De Beers has marketed the diamond into this place of infamy, and people have also argued against diamonds, and now there's the whole myth about, I won't call it a myth, it's not a myth. Blood diamonds were real, they happened. That does not mean that all diamonds are blood diamonds, right? So one of the things that I do when I'm educating my engagement clients, when they're trying to decide what to do, I would say 60 to 70% of my clients decide to go with a colored center stone and diamond side accent stones. So usually the accent stones are 1 or 2 millimeters, maybe 3, and those are always sourced from Canada. That's where my supplier is getting their accent stones. And then the center stone is usually cut here in the States to order for my clients. But then there are some clients who want the diamond, and we kind of go through, well, what does that mean? How do you want it? You know, where are your interests? Like, how do you want this stone to come to you, and are you willing to pay for that variance? I'm just going to check in on the chat. Another thing is that that created the birthstone myth, and it's advertising to get more people interested in other stones. Okay, interesting.
Well, so does anyone here really, value or relate to their birthstone? I mean, I'm April, so I'm very spoiled. That's maybe why I defend diamonds.
Well, I'm May and an emerald, and I don't really care for them whatsoever. So I don't think I own any emerald jewelry, and I don't really plan on it. So old mine cuts and old European cuts. European cuts is where I think where it's at. Yes, so that is when I have a client who is concerned about the diamond market, and they still maybe want a diamond, or their partner wants a diamond, that's when I start educating about older stones, the pre-modern brilliant diamonds. The modern brilliant being that 1940s cut that is what you see when you think of a diamond, when you look at diamond shape, when you see an ad for a diamond. That is the brilliant modern cut, and is very new. It's not an old stone. The technology designed for those perfect proportions is still very young. And all the stones cut before that point, before De Beers brainwashed everybody into spending 2 times their salaries on a stone, 2 months salary on a stone, they were buying old European cuts or old mine cuts. Mine cuts are the slightly older version of the modern brilliant. So they have the table, the girdle, the pavilion, everything kind of looks sort of right, but usually it's a little chunkier. The old European cut is the era before that, when things were even harder to do. They didn't have the technology, the proportions weren't quite right, and most of these stones are brilliant in their uniqueness, in the amount of color that shines instead of the brilliant shine. It's like prism colors instead of just sparkling white light. Um,
If I remember correctly, were cut because of the modern lighting at the time. We have, obviously halogen, fluorescent, whatever else. But they were cut intentionally with the concept of being really beautiful in candlelight and low light. They shine light. Outside light wasn't really its priority because these were statement pieces that were worn consistently at like dinner parties or whatever else. It wasn't like women were doing yard work in these things. If you had one, you weren't doing yard work.
Right. I think when I'm looking at my mine cut diamond that I covet it the most when it's overcast and cloudy. Maybe that's a Europe thing. Maybe it's an England thing. I'm not quite sure. Sometimes I catch it and I'm like, holy crap, it's so pretty. But it's like there's no sun, there's no lighting. It's just kind of that ambient look. I digress. I think that when it comes to gemstone symbolism and diamond symbolism, it's a lot of advertisement. It's a lot of just trying to navigate that world of how can I sell this thing that I have a lot of because I have a mine now. And we've all been kind of navigating that world, and then you kind of realize that actually, this stone is really cool, but no marketing company was ever in charge of it. Like the spinel, right? Absolutely beautiful, huge color range, decent hardness. Well, who the heck is selling it? Who's advertising it? Why do I have to explain to everybody what that is, right? So it's just kind of interesting to see how we end up with what is and what isn't in vogue for that.
So, a lot of that has to do with the marketing, of course. I love spinels too. They're beautiful. So to wheel back to engagement rings or De Beers or even old mine cuts or old emeralds, old Europeans. So what do we think about, the trends of engagement rings? So we had, in the most recent memories, halos, excessive pave, massive stones, small stones, clusters, bouquet settings. We have all these like variations. The
classic ballerina setting.
Ballerina. The 3-stone, solitaires. There's just so much. But right now we're seeing still big stones on very, very skinny bands with very, very bad support. I only say this because I repaired so many of them, and I even had friends who would come to me and they're like, hey, I'm about to get engaged. This is what I want. Here's my budget. I'm like, okay, well, here's what we can do. We can give you that, but not 4 carats. It's going to be like 1. And, that kind of shock factor geared a lot of people to go towards these like basically supermarkets of jewelry like Blue Nile and Brilliant Earth, and these people who have great marketing schemes and they make stuff really, really accessible, which loses the handcraftedness in my personal opinion. I want something, especially in that circumstance, to be a forever piece, and these are clearly not built to last in that regard. So what are we seeing now, Emily? Like, you're building a ton of engagement rings. You mentioned that you're seeing more center colors with smaller side stones. Are we doing 3? Are we doing 5?
Yeah, I would say that most of my rings right now, I would call them 3-stone rings with a colored center and a pair of accent diamonds.
Gold, platinum, white gold.
I couldn't pin that down. I think that for me, my rings tend to be, they could be any metal. I have no idea what somebody's gonna say when they're like, I want this. And I'm like, are you sure? Are you sure you want that with this? Like we but no, usually there's a really brilliant pairing of what how the stone looks with the metal, right? So the last couple of engagement rings I've made of a certain line, I've got a specific line of kind of leaf motif with so it's a sculptural leaf with a pair of diamonds and a center stone that's color. The first one I made was a pair of diamonds and a shield shaped color changing lavender to pink spinel. The second one was a pink cushion cut sapphire with a pair of diamonds. The first one was in pink gold, the second one was in yellow gold. Working on another one in pink gold with a trillion party sapphire and some diamonds in. So I think for people, it's all kind of color stones let people say, this is my personality, this is me, let's do it, right? When you look at diamonds, right, you're paying for all of this, color and clarity in a certain dimension. So the round stone lets you kind of go, oh, I can pivot this stone right here in this big hunk of rough and not have any imperfections, and then it can be very, very expensive. Whereas the color stones, and Erin can kind of touch in on this, there is a lot of people who are attracted to the imperfections, the color play, the way that color stones offer their own personality. I think that is very exciting. Hold on. So Erin just said, speaking about traceability, unless a color stone is perhaps an Australian sapphire or a California tourmaline, the traceability for a color stone seems to end at a master dealer in Arusha, for example, who is supplied by many smaller independent dealers and artisanal miners. The best color gem traceability I've seen comes from companies that own their entire supply chain, truly mine to market. There is a lot of ethical and philosophical debates people can get into over materials from Africa or Madagascar, for example, or Tanzania. Sorry, that seems like a typo, but he's right. There is a lot of people saying, oh, I want this, but I don't want it to be that, right? So I would like a center stone, but I don't want a diamond because the blood diamonds. But they don't actually know that the sapphire can have the same background, the garnet can have the same background, the the emerald can have the same background, except they didn't make a movie about it in Hollywood, and so now.
Not yet. Well, maybe Sicario, but like not directly. But I'm just kidding. So there's also, in my opinion, you know, just as much concern can be held for the metals. We've talked about this a lot with recycled metal, with refining. In those processes you go through as a jeweler or anyone in the industry who's trying to preserve their money or cost. So at any point in time, you can be sitting on thousands of dollars of metal just to have stock for sizings, for prongs. I mean, for anything, little minute repairs. Who's to say that, 9 times out of 10, those pieces aren't going to be coming from the same places in theory, right? We do have some more traceability, in my opinion, because when you're buying from these places, you want to make sure that your purities are very clear and from a reputable company and whatever else, if you're not doing your own refining. Emily has a lot of fabulous practice with kind of taking some pieces that might come from a family at a point in time, grandma's engagement ring and Aunt Mary's necklace and whatever else, and we can basically melt them all down, refine them, clean them up, purify them to whatever metal we have going on here, and make your engagement ring. And the labor in that cost is kind of fluctuating, in my opinion. So there are some companies like Toby Pomeroy who pride themselves on their recycled metals and their clear, precise sourcing of stones and that kind of thing, and it appeals to the demographic that he lives in, which is California. So how important do you think that is in the work that you do right now? Are those questions that come up often, or is that something that you already pride yourself ethically so it's notarized?
Right. So for me, I don't think that I brand myself as somebody who does ethical sourcing or does recycled products or, shop small, shop local. I don't brand myself that way. I do use recycled metals. I do my very best to source stones that are traceable. I do not buy stones from just random dudes on the internet, right?
That Instagram ad didn't work for you?
I can't tell you how many gem dealers I block on Instagram daily. Daily. I probably block 4 or 5 different people online on my private Instagram. Like if I left them, I'd probably have 10,000 followers by now. But I block them because they're not engagement. They're not here to buy my jewelry, and they're usually kind of disconnected from the reality of who I am and what I kind of need from them, right? So I really, I try to focus on supplying myself with the right kind of products. Now, I kind of think that at this stage in the game, you're kind of preaching to an echo chamber to say, oh, my stones are ethically sourced, my metal is recycled. It's like, okay, if you order your metal from the biggest company in the country, you're getting recycled metal, and there's not another option there. That's what they're doing. They're taking your metal, they're recycling it, they're selling it to somebody else. Kind of, that's an inherent value thing that's happening with our materials. Like we have extra, we send it in to get refined. I get cash or credit. They get the metal that they then turn around and sell it and market to the next person. So for me, I think I read somewhere or I heard somewhere somebody say, why do we have to say it's handmade? It's handmade. Like, well, okay, sure, there is a huge market for it's handmade, but also, yeah, my jewelry is handmade. Here are videos of me making it. Do I have to call it handmade when I showed you 40 videos of me making this piece, right? When you're talking to an independent craftsperson, like, I think you should get the gist. So real quick, Michelle asked, I want to know how I can keep my eyes on what's trending. So let's pause this for a second. She's got to run. She's on the other coast and has a class that's starting. You could see her. She's a kind of, there she is. She's in her car. Now she's on the video. So Chloe, how would you say somebody could watch that stuff?
Okay.
I have to say I'm kind of like in a hole too. Like I'm at home, I'm with small children. I wouldn't say that I'm really in the design world at all. I don't like I wear sweats every day. Like, so sometimes I'm just making stuff and I feel like every once in a while, like I look around and like, okay, what's happening out there outside my hole? So I guess I need just like, where are some places if I do have my eyes outside the hole for a few minutes, like where do I look?
So I've always kind of felt in the sense of, your trends aren't always going to be in your fine jewelry. It's more in your fast fashion. So in my opinion, I've found some of my favorite coveted pieces of like lucite or leather or whatever else, like these kind of unconventional materials, through flea markets or also through even like H&M, surprisingly, right? That being said, I'm not saying take all your trends from those pieces, but what I always like to do is I like to kind of look at different, the Sartorialist is one of my favorite places to just see what's going on in different parts of the world. And that's normally where I get my influence of trends and what I see is kind of happening elsewhere. So he's a fabulous photographer who basically shoots fashion weeks all over the world or just street style. But I find that, you know, keeping an eye out in your own like local smaller shops, little pieces that you see start coming in, like the hand beaded collars that are being imported from Venezuela or whatever else. You kind of craft these own trends yourself by finding the unique pieces that you don't typically see. That's what you're likely going to see next year because they start to trickle in. And so I don't know if that answers you super directly, but it kind of gives you a way to look for it yourself. Right now, what I'm seeing is like a ton of astrological stuff, a ton of saints, a lot of gold metal. I'm seeing a really cool 80s resurgence. So if you kind of want to take your like, you know, the pieces of like your favorite 80s movies or even like, you know, someone who rocked that decade, it's all coming back with a vengeance. Like I found this awesome braided heart necklace that had almost like a mesh chain. And my mom was like, I've had that thing since like 78. And I was like, well, okay, sorry. Like I thought it was really cool. So what I'm finding is, you know, is that we're kind of, that's the decade we're moving into because we have this 70s resurgence with some more delicate, some pieces that were very 60s influenced, but I think we're moving more into a little bit more chunky, a little bit heavier, kind of aesthetic almost. So for your home life, you know, I would say that like treat yourself to like a couple pieces that you see online and these different really cool, and I'll send some links to Emily that she can post like when she reposts this of like different places that you can kind of watch trends or find affordable baubles that are kind of just something to test out a look for yourself instead of investing in the major piece first. Does that help? Hopefully.
I guess too, like I'm looking at like 1980s sci-fi is something. Like I just watched Dune the other day, the miniseries, and I'm like packing it up, sketching like the cool layered earrings that one of the main characters was wearing. And the other one was like something that caught my eye was Whitney Houston on the front of one of her albums is wearing these enormous like geometric triangle earrings, and I'm just like, oh yes,
Coming back like
and I just love it. But I actually don't know how any of that stuff would land. It's just what I love, and so I'm like, okay, well, I'm just gonna do this and I'm gonna put it out there. And so I guess the other end of that question would be like, you know, how do I know I'm on the right track? Like I'm booking down this track as far as I can go, and then I'm looking around going, okay, how do I know if this is gonna land?
I personally think you're absolutely on the right track because that's kind of the veer I was going towards, like some really cool Dune, Mandy, like just like awesome, wicked kind of like techno color. And I think like, you know, the color blocking of stuff might come back too with the geometrical shapes of earrings. Bakelite is one of my favorite things, and I think that's coming back. It used to be made with formaldehyde, and so I think, you know, ethically we've changed that up a little bit. That being said, like big chunky lucite of different color, like Alexis Bitar. Though Alexis Bitar might not be like the trending designer of that, he's kind of like the godfather of bringing that look back. And so that's kind of what I think I'm gonna see a bit more in this next coming year. And that's easy stuff that you can throw on that's very durable, like when you're living in that transitional world, in my opinion. So rock them, check back in, see how like how you think. But I will definitely send some links to Emily, and we can, you know, kind of go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, and if anybody else has other questions that you guys want to ask, like please feel free to chime in. You can either put them in the chat or you can hop on and join us. No pressure either way. But one of the things that I tend to do is I watch a lot of antique vintage dealers that is where I'm watching what people are searching for, what they're clamoring for, the things that sell in a couple seconds. They posted it and 8 minutes later it's sold. That to me screams, take a look at this and try to make it modern, try to make it approachable, because that's what people want and it's not there. So they're buying it from 50 years ago. They're buying it from 100 years ago. They're buying it from 150 years ago. And that's something that you could be making and adding to your collection, but making it made by somebody that they can have a relationship. You can make it in a product that is circling back, recycled metals, ethically resourced, right? And you can be offering them that option that doesn't have any of the mystery, good or bad. And they can access that really cool design that, the person who made it is 100 years gone. So why not get inspired by it and work on it that way?
You make it your own that way too, in my opinion, because ultimately it's not like you're sitting here like totally rectifying the design. And if you are, in a way, that's okay as well, in my opinion. Not to say like, oh, I was the first person to do this, but like that you really appreciate the ode to the design and that you're trying to honor it the best way you can. I think as far as like jewelry makers or jewelers alike, just in the sense of like you're trying to curate things that are the best for your audience. Listen to your audience, like what are your top selling pieces and how do they think it can be improved? Emily does a great job of this where she's like, hey, what do you think about this bezel being, 2 millimeters thicker? Would you guys be into this? Should it be hammered? Should we polish? Should we sandblast? And kind of getting these like inputs from your audience broadens maybe your vision, because I get super stigmatized personally where I'm like, no, it needs to look like this because I would wear it if it looked like this. And I don't really look outside the box of who else is wearing my stuff, or who else is looking for those designs in that regard. So I think, your audience and, your fan base is always going to be your biggest trendsetter, really.
Right. Yeah.
And taking pieces sorry to cut you off, Emily, but taking pieces that you don't see as your top sellers, just as much as pieces you say are your top sellers, give them facelifts. Don't let them get too phased down and beaten into like a singular unit or singular style. Like let's say you have your hex pendant, you could say hex 2 or Friday the 13th hex or whatever. You could like play
right.
these kind of like different influences of seasonal changes, because we all do have variations in design. I've never designed something and said, okay, that's the only way I ever thought it could look like. Done. Like I've drawn it a few different ways and thought maybe it should be this, maybe it should be that. And, I think we need to kind of explore those options more, and you really can showcase your own creativity and your trends.
Yeah, I definitely experienced that when I'm kind of going back through my pieces. And one of the things that I think is fun to talk about was last month, Metalsmith Society had the Metalsmith Society Challenge, and it was before and after, or reworking an old job, right? And for me, that conversation was more about how can I do what I've done before better, even if it's just adhering or applying the skills that have improved, making that thing 8 more times since the first time I made it. How can I go back and say, all right, I did this once and I liked it, but you know what? People tend to want it like this. Or you know what? I can fuss with this and make it a little bit more streamlined. Or, hey, I learned this cool technique and I can do it this way. And I think that even when we're looking at our own work and how it was 6 months beforehand and how it will be now if we made the same thing, that own growth is just the same thing that you can apply to being inspired by anything that you see out there in the world. You can go, okay, I like what you're doing here, but if I add a dash of this, it'll be different or better or my own in that sense. I think that there's a really fine line between getting inspired and copying.
Oh yeah.
I also think that if you're going to be inspired by something, there's a quote my uncle has up in his studio, or the jewelry studio down in DC, and it says, bad artists copy, good artists steal. And it's that concept that if you're going to get inspired by something, if you're going to take that idea, not only get inspired by it, but make it so unrecognizable that it is now your thing that you've put out there. This is your concept that you are now delivering into the world, because you own it now. And that's kind of that thing that you should take when you're saying, I see this trend, I see this concept, I've seen the charm bracelet 400 times. How do I make the charm bracelet mine? Right?
Well, and also, do you think that ultimately people are seeking consistently the same original pieces? Like, do you think that people are seeking something new and revitalized, revamped, modernized? I mean, I personally do. I think that, like, in theory, you know, we've talked about the chain bracelet a million times, that double chain situation, that it's always on so that you can have as many chains as possible. I think, well, you know what? Listen, why don't we just embrace it? Why don't we just make this chain even thicker, even like quadrupled, so you can just have even more, and then you could just have like a bobble beaded chunky charm situation, because you really kind of have to relish in those pieces, I think, ultimately, than first fighting them. Or you can strip it all the way down into singular little drop pendants. You know, what I love is just like a very silly, cute trend that, you know, no one has to like catch on to per se, but I like how it's evolved a little bit. You know, we all have seen the very thin cable chain, the 1.5 round, typically gold, with an initial or like dream or some kind of little thing written on it, just to give it some kind of subtle femininity of some variation. But I love the vote necklace. And every time I see it, I just love it. And I'm like, oh, I know it's like not even a creative design. I just love that everyone's just like empowered to wear it. You know,
Right.
Of the times that we're in, it's very cute.
Right.
I like that it's kind of sending a fun message, because ultimately jewelry doesn't have to do that all the time. It can be totally ornamental. It can be statement. It can be subtle. It can be something that you wear because someone gave it to you that means something. But ultimately in the jewelry trends, I like to kind of see things that are uplifting and positive too, and have like some fun message behind them. Emily and I are both major fans of the Marley Aaron locks, as probably the rest of us in this room are. And so I have a really cool David Bowie one. That was like a weird little limited release one that my mom surprised me with. And though like David Bowie per se wasn't my favorite person, you know, like I wasn't really like about this little lock because it was David Bowie, I thought it was cute that my mom was like, oh, she'll like this one because it is David Bowie. And it's this designer she told me about one time. So it's the cute that I got, that like, though it wouldn't have been the lock I would have picked for myself per se, I still appreciate it and love it and wear it in that regard.
Right.
And I thought it was cool of her to kind of, you know, evolve her lock into different shapes, whatever else, and cater to an audience that likes those kind of pieces. She's done a good job with her evolution, I think.
Yeah, it's been very interesting to kind of watch. And, you know, I think you said something, and I'm not even sure if you kind of realized what you were connecting, but we started with the charm bracelet, right? It's the big mid-century bracelet with like so many charms on it that you can't see your wrist anymore. It's the charm tan, the watch tan, the thick chunky piece. And then we got super simplified. We were simple little necklace with a tiny little charm. And then you started getting into the more chains, more baubles, more charms. And really what we've done is we've gone, these need to hold and do so much. I'm just going to put the charm necklace up here, and I don't care if you can ever see my neck again. I'm covering it with all my feelings. And then what you're really playing into when you start to talk about, you know, the word pendants and the boat necklaces is you're kind of bringing it back to the fact that this is where our throat chakra is, and it's where we speak from, and it's where we tell our story. And moving the charm bracelet to the neck mess, which is that transition, goes, not only is this symbolism for me, it's symbolism I want to tell you about. And that's kind of what we've done in the past 65 years, moving this from this is my story to this is the story I'm telling you. And I think that that's a really fascinating way that we've moved our pieces. And I'm kind of having a moment of clarity on that it's very, very exciting for me, because I never really put it into that context until now. But I think that that's how that happened. I think that's why we're here now.
It very well may be exactly, how we moved into that. I think jewelry has always been a state of expression. Having the charm that's like Eiffel Tower and University of Louisiana, and I went one time to the Grand Canyon and whatever else, and the Christmas tree, and my 4 grandkids or whoever else. Also kind of, we've tried to modernize that in so many ways, where people wear the simple charm, the single charm, or whatever else. And I do think it's another way to silently not be silent in ways too. Jewelry was made in that way. And I wish I had, a better, cool story to connect to it. But we know pieces that are always kind of worn in that statement of like, I wore this intentionally so someone would see it, read this message, or understand, this is where I'm from, or this is what I'm connected to, or this is how I'm feeling, or whatever else. And, you've always done a great job of incorporating other artists in your pieces too, with layering and a really kind of uplifting message to me that maybe not even is, again, conscious on your behalf or theirs, but supporting other artists in that regard is really awesome and important. Because, just being decked out in one brand like a billboard, it's not really necessary, right? Like, supporting smaller artists, especially in times like this where we don't have a massive, exterior disposable income for most in the circumstances, supporting smaller artists keeps them alive and keeps us able to have these pieces that are curated for our personal taste, and not something that's mass produced and seen on like 500 other people. So yeah, I totally it was more that me just trying to compliment you in the regard that I've always loved to see the Emily marquee pieces with, vast amount of different designers kind of mixed in, and thought it was really cool. And it's inspired me to get other pieces and find other artists that I find similar or who are doing similar things. And I think that's a good uplifting message to be sending through the industry in general.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think, and I'll harken back to Metalsmith Society, which is, Corky Bolton is running this Instagram group, if none of you guys are following it, Instagram profile, where the entire, a very large amount of the jewelry community, predominantly younger women, are helping teach each other skills in the It Takes a Village style. Everyone submits tips and tricks and great deals and ways to do stuff and neat new products, and they all share it together, and she reposts it and shares it out into the world. And that concept, I think, amongst jewelry designers, sharing, making room for everyone at the table, I think that that's something that inherently comes to the table because of the influx of more women being in the industry versus less women being in the industry up through the 70s and 80s. When I hear stories about bench jewelers kind of being very competitive, some of it had to do with their bosses, and some of it had to do with their attitude of, if I don't make more money than you, I can't put food on the table. And I think that now it's kind of transferred to, there is enough food, there's enough money for all of us, And if I can make it, then you can do it your own way, and you can come to the table and also bring food home for your family.
Yeah.
And I think that that mentality is very new in this industry. And I think it's very, I say new, 20 years, 30 years. I mean, we've been making jewelry as long as we've been having prostitutes. So it's been a really, really long time. And I think 20 years is a very short time to go, we can all learn together. We can all prosper. Just because you know the trick and I know the trick doesn't mean either one of us is going to get the sale. And I think that when I'm shopping for jewelry, I'm looking to support other small designers because, could I make it myself? Probably. Do I want to? No, it excites me that they made it, that they came up with this thing, that, I get to have that little piece of their story along with me, and I get to share it with somebody else. People see my friends' pieces on me all the time, and I'm like, yep, here it is. You should probably custom order it in gold. I'm always about like, how can I put a little extra money in somebody else's pocket along with mine? And I think that that concept that the tide rises all boats is very true in this industry. And I think that that's kind of my preferred method of how I navigate myself in it. And I think that is one of the latest things to happen to kind of change this industry in the last decade and a half, 2 decades, is that people are realizing that everybody can bezel set a stone, everybody can buy a diamond, everybody can figure out how to enamel, but each person has their own voice and how they're going to use those materials and make those pieces and tell that story and educate their buyers. That's what's going to set them apart. It isn't about what you are making. It's about the quality of what you're making, the quality of the story that you're telling, the relationship that you're offering to your clients. And I think that that's really what, when I was saying before, it's not delicate, it's not statement jewelry, it's quality. That's what is in fashion right now.
Absolutely. And I think that, the clientele that does say, here's what I want, but I need you to make it $1,000 cheaper, is not the clientele that's going to keep coming back to you, and not the clientele that really appreciates the craftsmanship and the work. So ultimately,
right,
make the decision where it's like, all right, it is not to say like this is what you should be doing to your fellow jeweler people in the industry of any caliber, but maybe there is someone who can do what they want or already does what they want in a certain price range or whatever else. And it's totally healthy and it's totally fantastic to say, or you just have a client who's like, no, you're just not seeing my vision because we're not on the same path. Great. I really think so-and-so would be much better at making this custom piece for you because that's their style, not mine.
I have totally sent people in other directions where there's 2 ways of it. Either I don't want to, or I don't think I'm the best person for the job. And I think problem solving, saying no, but, is like, they're going to remember, this person couldn't do that job for me, or they couldn't meet my price range or whatever, but they were helpful and helped me find somebody who was equally as trustworthy or equally as caring or equally as, quality as they were, and gave me that, instead of just turning somebody away and going, no, I can't help you, or I don't want to help you. It's, no, I don't, I'm not interested for whatever reason, but who would probably be really good for this is so-and-so.
I agree. And I think that's a healthy way to do it, Let's see. Emily, you were starting to ask me about customers and gemstones before I interrupted you with a text wall. Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, we were kind of talking about gemstones and color stones, and I was saying that I really believe that, if a diamond, the goal is colorless, inclusionless, color stones have the brilliance that you can get excited by seeing a whatchamahoozy, the crystalline structure, if you can see the tubes growing, if you can see a cloud structure, if you can see a hexagon thing forming, and I'm calling these inclusions kind of whatever I think they are, but I think that there is a really very cool quality to color stones that allow you to be a lot more flexible with inclusions, and that's what makes them special. And I was wondering if you got that kind of feedback from people buying color stones from you. And if you want to hop on the video, I can put you on here, or you can just type it. I can read it, kind of whatever you want to feel comfortable with.
There was also, not to interrupt, but I'm going to say just so we don't miss, there was another question about Sarah says, what do you think about an 18 karat yellow gold, very thin band for an engagement ring? There's a man that wants me to make that with a rustic diamond. I'm afraid it'll be too soft. So just so that's on your horizon as well.
Oh yeah, I missed that question while Aaron decides if he's going to type or join us. When I am doing a band under 2 millimeters, I don't do a softer metal. So 18 karat white, sure. 14 karat yellow, sure. 18 karat rose, sure. I think once you get into 18 karat yellow with also a delicate band, that's when you're really going to maybe shoot yourself in the foot. And so instead of saying, no, I won't do that, what I like to do is play educate the client, right? So I want to teach them why that might not be the best choice, and then explain to them why some of the other options might be better, or making a thicker band, or making a more sturdy structure. And that way you really get to not only be a problem solver, but you get to seem like an expert on the subject, right? You're saying, that could work, but I would change it these ways, or I would change these parts. And you've given them a couple options to kind of think about, and then they're trusting you because you know the answers, you know the correct answers. It's not, I'm going to make this because you want it, because the customer isn't always right. They don't have all of your experience. They don't understand engineering structure of jewelry. They don't understand alloy hardnesses. That's not their job. Their job is to have taste and money. And your job is to be the engineer. And so when I'm kind of working that around, I take that opportunity to educate and problem solve and direct them to the better choice, or not do the job, because I'd much rather say no than risk them losing a stone and being very, very upset, or bending the ring and being very, very upset. And that happens sometimes where you go, okay, I'm going to do it your way, but by the way, here's a disclaimer where I advised you otherwise, right? So
You've had plenty of conversations in that regard where it's like, well, this might not be the ring for you since you are a rock climber yoga instructor and you don't want to take your ring off ever. Well, I think we're going to have, not a 2 millimeter band set with pave.
how about that woman that swore that she wasn't weightlifting but still had the knurling bar like finger marks onto her ring? Oh my gosh. Like, there's only one thing in the world that makes that pattern, and it is the grip on a weight bar.
Yeah, like unless you're literally walking down a staircase on your hands, I don't know how else you could be doing this.
Right. So Aaron responded to our question about whether or not color stone imperfections were in vogue or not. He says, I'm experiencing two different camps of people. There are people out there who love inclusions 100%, more and more and more. So beautiful and unique, but many customers still want perfectly clean and colored gems, which realistically isn't always in the card for their price point. And I think that's also true. People think that because they're not getting a diamond, that they're not going to spend as much, but still get perfection. And really, the truth of the matter is, regardless of the gemstone, you're paying for perfection, not the color that the beryl or the agate or the crystal developed in. Because you can get a diamond in any color you want. The goal is to get that really perfect inclusionless, cloudless piece of stone cut perfectly. So Sarah says, thank you. It's a friend and I'm having a hard time saying no. So education is the answer. And yes, I also think that educating your client is your job, and it's a number one way to problem solve a situation where you feel like they might be going down the wrong road and you don't want to join them.
Yeah, and I think also being so clear about you really wanting to make the ring that they love, and you really knowing that, yes, this is the ideal vision you're seeking. Like, we're seeing eye to eye. I do understand. I can be the jeweler for you, but I also am going to be the jeweler to make sure that my product is going to last and be in the best interest of you. Is a big conversation that needs to be had a lot of the time with most clients who seek that exact
Right.
style.
All right. Well, we're wrapping. We're about 2 hours in because we started a little late. Does anybody have any more questions? Or Chloe, have you thought of anything that you wanted to touch on that we haven't touched on yet? I had a whole list of things that we could have blathered on about.
We can always do a part 2.
Yes, we could. We get into like the history of the ankle bracelet, right?
That's one more I think we should do. Even if we do a mini segment, we should definitely talk about possession jewelry.
The Cartier love bracelet, the engagement ring. In that sense, we had a whole prior discussion about that. I had a whole like rabbit hole about Diana's engagement ring and the halo and how that kind of became our definition for almost 20 years of what an engagement ring should look like. And did you know that her engagement ring was not custom made, but it was like a line, like it was part of a line from a designer, and that was like $60,000, but totally gauche, because how should a princess have a ring like out of the store, out of the box?
Oh, I didn't know that. I do know that they typically will only, I won't say typically, I think it's like there's no option, but your wedding band is made out of the family's Welsh gold source.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So your wedding band has to be made out of this specific vein of gold that was found in Wales, I believe. I don't know too much about the actual gold itself, but I do know that that was like this big thing about the family. And I think that I don't know if Meghan Markle, had any issues about it, but I think Diana was like, I don't care. Like,
right.
Anyway.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to watch these two women, Kate and Meghan, become icons in a way that their mother-in-law was. Right. And kind of like, well, you guys should be too. And they're like, I don't know if I was made for this. But then, because of the position that they were thrown in, and because of the way that kind of media and Hollywood, so to speak, had kind of grabbed onto Diana and her fashion and her story, because she was fashion conscious, because she did step outside of the box, they're kind of putting that
same pressure cage.
They're putting that story right on these two women, and so it's just kind of interesting to kind of see, like, I think at some point Meghan wore like Herkimer diamond earrings with like absolutely no metal holding them together, and everybody was like, I have to have them, and I'm just sitting there going, there's so much glue involved. These earrings can't exist in reality. Like, you understand that, right? Like, they're just very cute. Just because she's a duchess or a not duchess or whatever she wants to be does not mean that this is quality. It just means it's trendy, right? And so that's when you kind of get into that balance of, is it trendy or is it a lasting
trash, or is it trend?
Right.
Not to cut it short, but like that's really what it comes down to, is like a lot of these trends that people will seek are pieces of jewelry that are mass produced or ill produced, and they become repair nightmares. And not only that, they're pieces that people will spend a impulsive amount of money on at times because they want that look initially, and then it becomes like something that they have buyer's remorse for, and it doesn't stay together. And anyway,
They spend more time and money fixing it than they even spent buying it.
right.
Yeah. I
But
still have nightmares about that either rough diamond or I think it was a rough diamond necklace with 18 karat white gold pigtails. I just, it was just kind of like a beaded necklace, but the nature of a rough cut diamond and the brittleness of 18 karat white gold, just, it broke all the time. And she would bring it in and we would fix one. And then a month and a half later, she'd bring it back in and we'd fix the next weakest one and we would just follow it along. And I think I paid my own salary fixing that thing, you know, which I joke. It was not that significant, but
it broke a lot. It definitely was a paycheck, you know. Ugh.
yeah. Erin says, I've bothered Emily with this before, but super thin bands make me nervous. Yes, we've talked that up and down. And that's why when I do make something like a stacking ring or something with a stone in it, I'll make a silver stacker under 2 millimeters. The price point is like, sure, here, have it. Like, I'm not going to chase this thing around. But I won't make anything that delicate outside of 14 karat yellow. And people are like, oh, well, I want this stone and I want it in silver. And I'm like, I won't sell that to you because I don't trust it to not be what I gave it to you less than 6 months later. And yes, I may be asking more money because it's a higher, you know, it's gold versus silver, but I think I'm delivering something that's going to last you a decade instead of a year, or 2 decades instead of a year. And so I kind of go back and forth on that a lot with people. And I'm like, no, I really need you to trust me on this one.
You're not wrong. Well, this has been awesome and super fun for me. I totally love jewelry, and I've always been someone who has kind of gravitated towards any type of artistical adornment. So obviously the two go hand in hand, and catching up with Emily this way with you all has been really, really awesome for me. So thank you for having me and letting me blabber about my thoughts about jewelry. But yeah, if Emily will have me again, I would love to be here again, and we can go into more depth about, you know, more stories or
I would
of Diana or the Princess Royals, and we can even do like a Renaissance series. It could be fun.
I would really love to do a whole like talk on movie jewelry, and either movie jewelry that was synthetic for show, or movie jewelry that inspired trends, or movie jewelry that was so real that like it never got worn again and got immediately put into a museum. I think that would be a lot of fun, kind of looking at these iconic Hollywood pieces and how they infiltrated our psyches and kind of played out after that.
Let's do it, especially with Titanic.
Oh my gosh.
We can talk about my girl Liz.
All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna sign off with all of you because you've been troopers. It's been a little over 2 hours, and I absolutely love talking with you and kind of getting this conversation going about all sorts of different aspects in this industry. And I think that it's the kind of thing that doesn't get enough time sometimes to just go, I've got this question that reminds me of this, I want to get into it. And between the Instagram and our jewelry school, and let's list all the lovely things that I'm busy doing all the time, I'm constantly attracting people who have questions and they want to learn, and they have, you know, they just want to dive deeper into it. And I naturally love teaching. And so that's kind of, this is my happy place. And so these kinds of things, these semi-regular live chats where you guys can kind of check in and hop on, and this for me is kind of like that really awesome blend between you know, how to learn, how to teach, how to explore new concepts, and happy to keep it going. Super thankful for people like Sarah and Erin and Michelle and Rose who kind of support us through Patreon, and that is a really awesome way to kind of help us devote the extra time to research these topics, to put on these talks, and I'm just super thankful that you guys find that that is worth it to you to contribute to. So thank you guys very much. Thank you, Chloe, for joining me on this chat. I'm gonna sign off with